Hello, I'm Blair Cunningham and I'm running for the position of Honorary Secretary in the Glasgow University Union's elections on Thursday.
Hi Blake, how are you doing?
Not too bad.
Thanks for coming. Our first question would be, as Honorary Secretary, being responsible for much of the Union's most profitable assets such as Hive, its licence, events like Daft Friday, how would you ensure that the Union remains profitable against its competitors?
So obviously things like Thursday night, for example, are our sort of main driver of bringing people into the building and making money and making sure that we have money to provide all the services we do. I think it's important to mention the GUU is not really a charity in the sense, or is a charity in the sense of it doesn't make a profit to, pay for big fat cat salaries or bonuses or anything. We run for the members, so a lot of what we provide on other nights and such is subsidised. Things like debating, for example, our magazine, all those types of things are subsidised, and even just things like our catering, for example, so that we can provide stuff for clubs and societies at as best a price as possible. So really I think it's about, in terms of keeping those nights busy, making sure that with Thursdays we keep a really consistent offering, because people just, I think, really love our Thursdays and sort of the cheesy tunes and the dancing about and belting about and Hive and whatnot. And then, as I've put in my manifesto on Saturdays, I'd like to see us try and expand that a little bit. So I'm really keen to see us try and give a better offering for clubs and societies in terms of having a much more well thought out plan of action for what we're going to do. And really, as I said, putting those clubs and societies and all the students at the university at the forefront of that, so that they're coming in and getting to be part of that in a much more productive way by having their events there and knowing months in advance that they can have their events there.
And for on your manifesto, you talk about awareness of Daft Friday. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, sure. So I think with Daft Friday, in previous years, the big discussion's always been about the queues and things. I think to the HonSec last year, Kerry Anderson, she did a lot to sort of try and alleviate that in terms of how we managed it inside. And unfortunately, there's not a lot we can do with the outside queuing. So my focus really this year has been on trying to actually make it clear to people that Daft Friday is not just a one-day event. There's about 70 students who work across the entire semester putting a massive amount of work into it, be it painting the huge boards that go around the place, be it building all the props and such. And those students put in a really big shift. I don't think we do enough work to really give them recognition, and I don't think we do enough to promote other students getting involved in it. Very often it ends up being GUU freshers helpers who do it, and we can struggle to find people with those skills. So I want to really run a lot of outreach at things like Freshers Week and at our end of term parties to promote the skills of Daft Friday. I think that can be done through the Libraries Committee as well, in terms of having things like the Bob Ross painting sessions we've done tie into it, and maybe even using like features in the magazine and such to really showcase the types of work that our painters and builders are doing, because I think it can be too easy to forget about that being such a huge thing. And even tying back to what you said earlier about GUU making profit and such, it's things like Daft Friday that we invest a huge amount of money into to create those types of brilliant nights with the huge acts and having all that artwork on display and building really high-end props and stuff. So that's the type of thing that I think we can really deliver for students, and it's what I'd like to see us do a lot more of.
The next question would be about, for you specifically, do you think as Honorary Secretary, what's your opinion on, do you have the real power as Honorary Secretary to make tangible changes in the Union? And do you think if you do really want to put in a lot of change, there would be any possibility of conflict between you and the next president?
So I think in terms of things like changes and such, the GUU works very much within, I would sort of describe it as a co-equal executive structure. So the president's very much responsible for external issues and relations with the university, promoting funding, external media sort of contacts and things. The Honorary Secretary is much more of an internal role, but we work together, obviously. I don't see any sort of issue with either the presidential candidates and me working with them. I'm sure both of them would do a fantastic job, and I think on a lot of issues, particularly on welfare, I think I'm very aligned with both of them in the way that we want to go, and in terms of how we need to have more of a cross-campus sort of lined up approach, and also how we're going to look at the internal operation in the GUU to improve it. I think no matter what, we can end up with a really strong group next year, and if I'm in position, I'd really like to work with either of them to really make sure that members benefit rather than it being about the board.
And leading on from that, you talk about welfare now and also in your manifesto. And my next question would be that when it comes to student safety and security inside and also outside the building once they've left, do you think enough is being done to protect their welfare? Do you think there is actually a specific problem more than, for example, other unions or other clubs, with alcohol and predatory behaviour. Do you think the union and the staff could do more to prevent abuse, and what would you specifically do?
So I think welfare is an incredibly complex issue, and I'm very, very keen, and this is why I've put quite a lot in my manifesto about this, in terms of I've done sort of a second point about welfare specifically and how we can improve it, but also points about the additional security that we're starting to invest in and making sure they're trained as much as possible. I think it can be very easy when talking about how we run the GUU internally and how we promote welfare and such I think it would be easy, to make promises that can't be kept, or to say we'll solve all these problems. Very often there's a lot of complexity about these things. One of the things I've done this year is I led a review of our discipline policy over the summer, which is now our current discipline policy, and through doing things like that and speaking to lawyers and having been exec in the GUU now and being responsible for the night for the club on Thursdays, and having to deal with the police and things when they have to come in for incidents and such, there's a massive amount of complexity about this issue. I don't think there's easy solutions to these things. It's a very, especially at Glasgow with our unique student structure of separate charities running the unions and whatnot, there's no easy answer to this. So what I've tried to do in my manifesto is really lay out the context of that and the difficulties, and then practical solutions. I'm reluctant to make promises saying, I'm going to solve all these issues or whatnot, because I think that's going to take a joint up effort by all execs across the university, and it's going to take us working with the university, and to be honest with you, I think that will take some time. I'm not sure that's something that will be achieved in a year or 2 years or 3 years to get concrete answers about exact procedures and such, and that's not the university's fault or our fault. That's because this is more of a national thing as well, and it's something that we really have to make sure the university is asking national bodies about at that level to begin to make sure that national government, be it at Holyrood or be it in Westminster and such, are legislating on how these types of changes are working within the higher education landscape. To relate it back into the GUU and what I can do specifically, just having given that context, I think the most practical thing we can do is engage with groups to make sure that anything we can be doing, we are doing. So this is things like promoting our Ask Angela scheme, promoting the anti-spiking scheme that we have at the minute, which I think we need to promote a lot better, but also we need to speak to groups that are concerned about these types of things, or about things like walking home, and really find practical solutions. One of the things I propose is having forums where we don't just bring student board and these types of groups who are interested, but I also want to bring cross campus, and I also want to bring our head of security and our bars manager into them. I think if we do that, those are permanent staff who've been at the GUU for years. They're the type of people who can take on experience and really make sure it transitions from board to board, and make sure that there's a repository of knowledge, if you will, so that the initiatives aren't just dropped whenever a student board leave. It also means that they can directly engage with these types of people. They can become more known presences, and they can talk about some of the things we're doing, such as our Gold Award and the Best Bar None scheme, or they can talk about these new safety awareness stewards that we're starting to introduce, and they can then feed that back into what we can really do practically. And I think that's, to me, the most practical step we can take. The other thing is probably about signposting. I think far too often, and I think this is a cross-campus issue, and I've discussed it with quite a lot of cross-campus sort of leaders, is the issue about the information that we give to people. I think it's very easy for GUSA, GUU, QMU and SRC and the university to all, because we all sort of have our own people running things, be it PR channels or be it communications, to be saying slightly different things, or to maybe just be pointing one person to a slightly different website or an out-of-date sort of piece of information and whatnot. So what I'd like to see is really a joint-up signposting effort in terms of how we're pointing people towards where they go if they need information about reporting something, if they're looking for welfare services, if they need something that the university can provide or something the NHS needs to provide, or etc. etc. I think having a really joint-up signposting effort and making sure that that is something that cross-campus welfare forums are working on next year would be essential to trying to address as much issues practically as possible. So sorry to sort of shout it on there, but it's more. No, I think this is an issue where that type of context is really important, and the mature way of thinking about it is to really understand the extreme complexity of these issues. I'm really reluctant not to promise things that can't be done. I'd rather focus on things that can be delivered.
Leading on from one complex question to another, the union obviously needs to make a lot of progress in terms of sustainability, both the unions, but GUU as well. An example that comes to my mind is the large amount of plastic waste it creates. So how would you tackle the issue and sustainability more generally?
Cheers. So I think with sustainability, once again, an incredibly complicated topic. It's something that's hot in everybody's minds as well, and it's something we need to do something about. Once again, the whole sort of theme of my manifesto has been deliverable promises. I don't want to promise people that I can get rid of sustainable cups in a year, or say that we're going to radically change the GU to make it more sustainable rapidly. I just don't think that that is going to happen. The reason it's not going to happen is that we have a grade listed building, so to make modifications to install things like the water plumbing that would be needed to run dishwashing facilities to provide reusable cups is quite complicated. We can do it, but it's not going to happen in a year. It's the type of thing that's going to take several years to work on. We have board members who are currently on the board who are working on these types of things, and the other thing is, to do it is going to require a lot of work by groups like Historic Scotland to consult in on what we can do. It's also going to need things like, for example, the university's permission to be able to renovate the hive, because they technically own the hive, whereas we technically own the old building and stuff in it. There's a lot of it's essentially like a negotiation with your landlord, and we all know how difficult negotiating with landlords can be. And then, of course, we finally need to get the funding in place to do it through things like sustainability groups and sustainability grants that are providing the money to do these things. These things, I think, and also, regardless of the plastic cups, I also think the main thing in sustainability, from having consulted with the university and with consultation with our management in the building, the biggest sustainability issue we actually have is the per insulation of the building, in terms of a lot of the windows are constantly leaking out heat and such because they're single glazed. We've moved on to the university's district heating scheme as well, which, while that means it's probably better for the whole university in terms of it's a better heating scheme for them, it's slightly worse for us, I think, because we don't have individual control of the heating, and it's very difficult for us to actually accurately figure out how much of the district heating scheme's energy is being used by us. So these are complex issues that will take some time to solve. This is where I think a sustainability strategy enacted by the board of management is useful. And what I mean by strategy, because strategy can be a buzzword that doesn't really mean anything. When I talk about strategy, what I mean is having an edict or a sort of planning framework in place that every time GU invests in things, so be it renovating a room, be it things like in the last few years we've renovated the kitchen, billiards bar, had the big sort of bar up there installed, the hive obviously. Every time we do work, every time that we put new things in, there has to be a sustainability focus. So the questions like, is there access for dishwashing facilities, needs to be at the forefront. Insulation needs to be at the forefront. Sustainable lighting needs to be at the forefront. Things like that are how we're going to make the GU sustainable. It's how we're going to make the university sustainable. It's how we're going to make cities and countries and planets sustainable. It has to be through that type of sustainability in effect, as I like to call it. So I'm really keen to see us enact that type of framework and strategy to make sure we can actually do this. I think the work our sustainability committee has done in terms of promoting sustainability and engaging with groups like GUST and stuff has been brilliant. I want to see that continue, but I also want to see this type of strategy be enacted. And I think if I'm on the board, that type of knowledge and experience I have through everything that I've done on campus, be it being a helper for 3 years, having been president of 2 large societies, having been executive of the GU for the last few months, and having done all the things that I have done, I think I'd be really well placed to help guide the creation of that type of strategy to ensure that it's actually something that delivers in the long term for everyone.